So I was thinking earlier today about millennials, about my generation. Yeah, I am a millennial. Hi. Um, and why it seems like everybody dislikes us. You know, like older generations don't really like us, younger generations don't like us. People tend to find us annoying across the board. And so we're kind of sitting in a sandwich where everybody else is way, way cooler than we are. Like even old people, they're cooler than we are. And it is so unfortunate that we have become such a meme. But I think the reason we're so annoying to so many people has to do with the fact that we were so heavily programmed. Our social conditioning was so thick. And I think it explains a lot of the things that other people find annoying. So I wanted to talk about that. Now, just so we're on the same page, when I talk about millennials, I'm talking about people who were born in the early 80s up to the late 90s. So if you were a child or a teenager when the year 2000 happened, then congratulations, you, my friend, are also a millennial. And yeah, and I want us to take a look at the kind of things that we were watching as children.
An emotion in motion.
Hop on and ride him around.
So, first of all, understand that as millennials, we were raised, our parents are the boomers. The boomers raised us, or didn't raise us, But the boomers are also disliked across the board. And many of our traits were actually passed down to us from the boomers. It's the boomer worldview passed down to us. And some of the other traits that are also annoying were developed in rebellion to the boomer mentality. So we either wanted to please them or rebel against them. And this is part of the things that make us difficult to understand for other generations. So, for example, one of the key values that the boomers hold is the sexual liberation. They're really proud of how they got rid of all the sexual mores from the past. They're very proud of the Woodstock and the hippie movement and all of these things. And so I think they wanted to pass that down onto their children. And those were us. So I don't know how good that was for our psyche, you see, to be steeped in sexual liberation from like 9 years old on. Because I remember my childhood, since I was very little, all of these sexual things were being pushed into us. So, for example, I remember sex ed classes when I was 12, maybe even 11. And they were teaching us things that, honestly, I don't think a 12-year-old has any business learning. Like, for example, they were teaching us about how to put a condom on a penis. I had never seen a penis. None of my friends were sexually active. Far from it. Like, we were maybe experimenting with pecs. And yet, a teacher at school was teaching us all of these things. And sometimes, it was very awkward and it was uncomfortable, but also you kind of started to question your own, if you were a prude, you started to question, is this what is expected of me? Like, maybe I should be doing all of these things and I'm not. What is wrong with me? Why am I not there? If they're teaching me this, it's because they expect me to be sexually active, but I am not. Why am I not? So maybe the boomers had the heart in the good place. Maybe they wanted to teach us all of these things because if we're going to be sexually liberated, then we have to also be risk averse. Better be safe than sorry. We don't want to have a bunch of pregnant teenagers walking around, so we better teach them how to wear a condom. But it was completely counterproductive because instead of actually keeping us safe, what this did was instill in us a sense that we weren't going far enough yet. And and even younger than that, when I was 9 or 10, parents started to organize these tween parties for their children. Sometimes when it was somebody's birthday, but also sometimes for no special reason. And they would rent a hall, and the hall would be very dark, and they would have a DJ playing very explicit and graphic rap songs. And the children would go there at night, dressed in a very sexy way if you're a girl. And there was even like a bar. Like a bar. It didn't serve alcohol, it served soft drinks, but it was a bar. It looked like a bar. There was a fog machine and like laser lights. And you were there. There was even like a dancing, like a place to dance in. And couples were like grinding on one another. You were 9, you were 10. How was this deemed appropriate? But this was happening every weekend. You were 9, you were 10, you were 11. And then you went to school and they were teaching you how to put a condom in a banana. And then when you got home, you would watch movies, you would watch TV, and everything was extremely graphic and sexualized. This creates in you as a child a sense of like sexuality is nothing special. It's nothing sacred. It's nothing to take care of. It's nothing to protect. In fact, you should be getting rid of it as quickly as you can. There were movies, a slew of movies back then, aimed at, teenagers, but that were actually being watched by everybody, where sex was presented as a kind of rite of passage. Like you weren't considered an adult unless you had sex. The whole objective of the characters in these movies was to get rid of their own virginity like it was a disease.
Well, did you like it?
No.
No.
And at first it felt icky, and then it was sort of okay. Then I started getting really hot, and then I started like an explosion. But a good one.
Cecile, you had an orgasm.
I did.
You're becoming a woman. I'm so proud of you.
I am?
It's really simple. We just gotta make an agreement. We all get laid before we graduate. We must make a stand here and now. No longer will our penises remain flaccid and unused. By God, we will not stand by and watch history condemn us into celibacy. Amen.
I like that.
Yes, we will make a stand. We will succeed.
About time!
We will get laid! Yes!
And we were all watching these things, and it kind of penetrated into our minds. We were imitating what we saw on these movies. So yeah, and the idea was, you don't grow up by learning new skills. You don't grow up by developing your interior, your spirituality, your moral sense of the world. You don't grow up by accepting more responsibility and becoming more autonomous and helping out the people in your life. No, you grow up by having sex. This is like the rite of passage. Have sex and you're an adult, baby. And so you can see how this created this sense of like trying to push sexually as fast as you can into the adult life as fast as you can. And women in particular were being sold on archetypes of femininity. Like they were trying to sell us on this pre-made, prefabricated personalities or modes of being, right? It's kind of like they did to Gen X with the Breakfast Club, that you could be the jock, you could be the nerd, the jock, the popular girl, the weirdo, the theater kid, kind of like the same, but devoid of any kind of weight, of depth, Because with Gen X, you could be, for example, you could be a punk. And if you were punk, it's because you were anti-authoritarian and you were anti-establishment and you were rebellious. And then you liked to listen to punk music. And so you wore a certain type of clothing and you would identify one another by the clothes you were wearing so that you could cluster into little tribes, right? And you shared a common worldview. Same with goth, right? If you were goth, you had like a nihilistic view about the world and you like dark things and you dressed in a dark way. And then that way you could find each other and cluster into your little group and so on and so on. But in my generation, they kind of stripped any meaning out of that. It was just attitudes towards life. And so for women, they had a few of those. They had you could be like the empowered tomboy who doesn't really do relationships and doesn't really like boys, but as a romantic partners, but she does like to be like them. And you also had like the very sexually, the nympho, the sexually forward girl. And the important thing here is you are not allowed to have any regard for like traditional roles, femininity. Like you were not supposed to want to be a mother. You were not supposed to want to be just a wife or a mother or any of those things, right? So it didn't really matter much what kind of flavor of femininity you picked, so long as your aim was something different than conforming to femininity. Like you could be a girl boss, you could be empowered into your career, independent, or you could be a tomboy who doesn't like to follow any traditional roles, or you could be a slut, but you couldn't really say, you know what, I like traditional femininity, I want to be a mom and have children. That was not allowed.
It's a baby shower.
No, it's a cult.
It's a cult. What are you talking about?
Listen to me. They all think the same, dress the same, and sacrifice themselves to the same cause. Babies. I've lost 2 sisters to the motherhood. I know what I'm talking about.
And for boys, it was even worse because boys were more programmed into pointless acts of violence that I think they were redirecting like their rebelliousness towards self-harming or being a total moron, self-harming and harming everybody else for no apparent reason. And these type of characters were always doing things that would destroy like social cohesion. But if you didn't like the moron, you could also be a stoner, You could be a stoner, you could be a wangsta. The important thing if you were a boy was to redirect any sense of agency or, violence or power somewhere safe, somewhere contained, where you wouldn't be a menace to society in any way. So you could take all of your rebelliousness and turn it inwards towards yourself and your group, and then you became a jackass. But you could also go another route, and instead of expressing your violence tendencies, you could just drown them in drugs because you could become the stoner. And then any impulse towards autonomy, rebelliousness, any kind of idea that you had about defending what you had, it wouldn't matter. You would siphon it away through drugs. And then you had the nice guy who was completely harmless in every way. You were a nice, awkward guy, and how nice were you? And you had no impulses of any kind, like no sexual or, God forbid, violent impulses of any kind. You would swallow them all because you were a nice guy. And these were your options if you were a guy. And that's how we were brought up. And we also were brought up with views about the world. So one view that was it was consistently enforced and repeated over and over, was that the family, like the structured traditional family, was not normal. Because on every TV show and every movie, all the families were broken. Everybody was a single parent. All the parents were dating in front of their kids. And the kids were special precisely because they came from these dysfunctional, broken families. In fact, they were broken families. They coined dysfunctional families to refer to normal traditional families who were having like a rough time. They were dysfunctional. So you didn't want to have a dysfunctional family. You would rather have a broken family than a dysfunctional one. And what this does, and I want you to understand why this is so, why we call this programming and not just, they're not just pushing ideas like out into the market of ideas for people to pick and choose. That's not how it works, you see? Because TV, audiovisual content, TV, radio, internet, movies, they bypass your rational mind. The way it works is they smuggle things into your subconscious, and it's very difficult to detect them. So in the case of these divorced parents thing, the way it works is you kind of look at movies as if they were your tribe. You look to see what is considered to be normal and accepted. So when you look at all of these movies and in every single one the parents are divorced, then you think that this is what is normal. This is what is good, accepted, and normal. And so you look at your family and your parents are still married and you're starting to think like, why are my parents still married? What is wrong with my family? It must be a dysfunctional family. And you, thinking about your future, you start to question whether or not you want to get married in the first place. Do I want to get married and then be a single parent? Like all of these parents of these movies that I'm watching that are not having a good time? Maybe that's not the best idea, you know? And I don't think people remain married long. Why? Well, because look at all these movies, all these TV shows. Nobody's married. So people unconsciously accept the idea that a marriage is not a good idea. It's not. And look, I am not someone who is a crazy conservative, but I do understand that we shape our societies through these institutions, and marriage was a far more stable and enjoyable circumstance for people than what we have now, which is a permanent hookup culture that takes you nowhere. And we're not yet seeing like the effects of this in full force because people are still young. Like my generation, we're just pushing 40. We're not old yet. But imagine my generation, all the people that has foregone marriage, getting into the old age and being old and like still having roommates at 70, having nobody to share your life with. It's going to be sad for the people who chose to not, get married. And that's my opinion anyway. So yeah. And now, okay, so that's the way we viewed the world. But we were still optimistic. We were still allowed to be optimistic about the future because everything they pushed into us was this idea that that you had a place in society. So you had a place in society. If you did your part, then you were going to be taken care of. You were going to have a job. You were going to have a life. You were going to have friends, a life, a job, everything. You could afford to live the way you wanted to live. We had tons of TV shows and movies about that. All you had to do was follow the script. You had to graduate with a title, with a bachelor's degree, and then find a job related to what you studied. And then, work hard and be successful at your job. And then your life was going to be good. You're going to be happy. We had no idea what was coming. So we all jumped into it head first. We went to school, we got in debt, we went to career, we didn't even question. Like, there was not an option in our minds, like not an alternative path. The path was college. There was not another option. And we were completely blindly, we believed in this blindly. Like there was no doubt that we were going to be okay if we followed the script. But then they started to sprinkle the seeds of doubt into media way before things came crumbling down. This was 1998. When all of these movies started to come out, these all came out at the same year, mind you. All of these movies they start to question that reality is even real and if it's really worthwhile to stick to the script that you were given. And this was a bomb to us. This was a bomb because we had never seen anything like this. So these movies became so big. They were so heavily advertised. Their budgets were so huge, and they were so like they took the world by storm. And this is the first time like some semblance of doubt started to creep in to the millennial head of maybe the world is not such a good place after all. And 2 years later, we had, this was like a triple whammy because we had 1998 with all of these depressive movies, then Y2K, where they made us think that the whole world was going to collapse because of the change on the dates on the computers. And then we had 9/11. So Y2K didn't happen. So whew, everything is good. It was just a scare. But right after we had 9/11, and that completely changed things. It completely changed everything. Like the entire tone of culture and the programming went from peppy, happy, optimistic liberation with all of the excesses that we just discussed into dark, gloomy terror porn that came after. And we had the internet. And the internet was also extremely dark. You know, Web 1.0 looked nothing like Web 2.0. The internet was a scary place sometimes because you didn't know what you were getting. Like you could click on a link and all of a sudden you would be seeing, I don't know, like a lion mauling some tourists at a safari. There were webs like Ogrish, Gore.com. Even YouTube, like you could be just browsing happily on YouTube and all of a sudden you could find a video of somebody being beheaded. Live leak. And even like we had at the beginning of the internet, we had cartoons, like people making cartoons on the internet. I remember one called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, aimed at children with insane messages. Salad fingers, you know, there was a lot of very dark things happening right after 9/11. And think about what bomb that was for the brain of somebody who had seen nothing like this up until that point. They were promoting things like cutting into the emo subculture. So that was like a huge shock for the millennial brain, that moment in time. And then, but we still believed in the script. Like we still believed that the script was going to give us, like we were going to be granted the opportunity that everybody else had before us. So we went to school, we got in debt, we did everything that they told us to do. And then in 2008, everything came crumbling down. Surprise! All the promises that you were made were void, empty. There's no jobs. There's no jobs. The housing market, you're never going to have a house. Surprise. And now you have so much debt. So you couldn't find a job. No matter what you did, you couldn't find a job. You had all this debt. You couldn't find a job. The housing market was so crazy that you couldn't move out of your parents. And all of a sudden, you had a lot of very angry boomers. And the boomers were very angry, and they were blaming us for it. They said that it was our fault, that we were so lazy, that we didn't know how to shake hands with someone and look them in the eye to ask them for a job. It was our fault because we didn't accept having to start from down, you know, from a low wage job and like climb your way to the top. We were too lazy, you see. It's not that the entire world that they had engineered came crashing because of their excesses and that they had promised us something that was not there. And that we were left we were left grasping for air when things weren't there, like the things they promised us were not there. No, it was us. We were the culprits, you see? And that did a number on our heads. That was incredible. So all of these things shaped the way that millennials saw the world. And so it makes sense that We were punished for believing in the future, and we were brought up to be optimistic about it. And many millennials find it hard to let go of that optimism because they don't understand another language. This is the problem that Gen Z have with us. Gen Z wasn't even allowed to have hope. They were already born in a world that had crumbled. They had no hopes for the future, which is very sad in and on itself. And so they can't understand why we do, like why we have an optimism about the future, because they see that there's nothing there. We're still bullshitting ourselves, but they know that there's nothing there. So when they see us like defending our company, being the teacher's pet, they understandably so, they think it's quite cringe. They know there's nothing there. And then from the perspective of the older generations, they see that we're complaining for things like, they feel like they had it much tougher, They didn't even have the promise because they had to go out into the world and make something out of themselves by actually working. They didn't have 20 years of schooling, So they see us as soft. And this is where the millennials are sitting then. And so many millennials who were also, because we were brought up by the boomers, and the boomers are very idealistic when they were younger, we were also primed to be idealistic in a way. And for a long time, we tried not to care about things. But because we would rather give up on that semblance of nonchalance than on our sense of optimism, like somehow some things will work out, we like to pretend like we can solve the problems. And this is why millennials are so annoyingly political, why they're so intense with politics. It's because they still want to cling to the idea that things can be fixed and that there is an end to this. They want to fix it. However, whatever the cost, they want to fix it. They think if only they're like political enough, if only they are like rally hard enough, then things will work out in the end. And that is the drama of the millennial. So anyway, if you feel like you had a different experience, or if you feel like I'm missing something here, then please leave a comment telling me what I missed, because I think this is a very interesting subject, and especially if we can compare like the different programmings we had, because this is something that I'm passionate about, and I understand the programming that went into the boomers, into the Gen Xers, and to a lesser extent to the Gen Zs. Yeah, and one last thing that I want to say is, when I say that our social conditioning was more intense, what I mean by that is boomers and the people before them, the technology wasn't as advanced to engage in such subtle ways of manipulation. And now, after the internet, it's not as centralized as it used to be. There's many different, you can choose what you're going to watch to one extent. I mean, it's getting centralized, but But with us, we were the peak TV generation. TV was at its peak. It was cable, the age of cable. And we were the target of all of these programming, and we didn't have a choice. The only thing you could watch was whatever was being played on the TV. All you had to do was, you could choose between different channels, but most of them were owned by the same people, and the programming was pretty much the same across the board, just different schedules. You had no choice. You had to swallow whatever that was on the TV. That was what you were watching. There's no escaping that. So anyway, if you like this video and you thought it was interesting, then do subscribe. I really love seeing the number grow. You know, I'm new to YouTube, so I'm still getting excited when I see my subscribers climbing. I'm really excited about making it to 5,000 subscribers. And if you want to know when I post a new video, and you know as well as I do that the YouTube algorithm is unreliable and it doesn't really show you when people that you're following upload a new thing unless, I don't know, the stars align. So if you want to know next time that I post something, then you can go here. And there is a form there. You can enter your email in there. And yeah, and it'll send you a confirmation email. Make sure that you click on that link. And that way, whenever I post something new that I think is worthwhile, I will send you an email and you'll know. So thank you so much for watching. And if you're a millennial, I'm with you, man. Bye.
Oh, and this one time at band camp,